So, West Side Story, so well known. Everybody in America knows about this story, and you should too. Uh, so, it's based directly on Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. And a lesser known fact about Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet is he actually gets the story uh, from a poem that is written almost 30 years earlier by a poet named Arthur Brooke. And the title of the poem is called The Tragical History of Romeo and Juliet. So actually, Shakespeare kind of rewrites this poem into his theater production, Romeo and Juliet. And the story, West Side Story, follows Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet story almost to the letter. Spoiler alert here. The major difference is that Juliet does not die in the end of the story, uh, West Side Story. Okay, so that's one of the big differences. The themes are basically about the same. A few added theme topics, but the themes are love, loyalty, revenge, society and class, youth, and race. The message of West Side Story is a plead for racial tolerance. Uh, During this time, there were racial tensions from many different groups in America. So the story, West Side Story, revolves around two main characters, Romeo and Juliet, uh, Tony and Maria, and two rival gangs, the Jets and the Sharks, the Montagues and the Capulets. And it digs deep into social issues that are still resonate today. So let's take a little social analysis of gangs. What are gangs all about? Why do we have them? So the cause of gangs are multifold. Family breakdown, uh, poverty, poor housing, addictions, drug, alcohol, failure in education, crime, violence, unemployment. These are all the social aspects that contribute to the formation of gangs. Now, the gangs of the 1950s, when this story takes place, were basically about turf, slang expression meaning your property, where you live, your neighborhood, and protecting and keeping outsiders out of your turf. And the other reason for these gang fights are girls. Like, there's not enough girls in the world. You have to go cause trouble in your neighborhood for their girls. Okay, so um, drugs were not a big part of these gangs in the 50s in New York. These gangs were really about, again, protecting their turf, their property, but they were about fighting, fighting each other, fighting for your turf, keeping the other guy out of your neighborhood. Okay. And these fights were called a rumble. And actually, the gangs were made up of young kids between the ages of, let's say, 12 and 19. They were broken down by racial groups. In the city of New York, you had African Americans, Puerto Ricans, Irish, German, other different European groups, each locked in their own separate neighborhood. We talked about the positive aspects of that. Well, this is one of the negative things that happens as a result of these enclaves of, say, ethnic and racial groupings. So in 1950s, there were about 6,000 uh, gang members throughout the city in many different gangs. Again, drugs were not a big part of gangs because gangs were meant to be fought. If you're addicted to drugs, you're not a good fighter. And the gangs would often chastise their group members who got involved in drugs and eventually got rid of them because they couldn't fight. Okay, so um, gangs were broken down into there would be like a group leader, a president, or maybe a warlord, and you'd have a vice president or vice warlord, and these gangs would meet with their rival gangs in a neutral territory to plan their rumbles. And the rumble could take weeks to plan. Time, location, dates. Well, what kind of rumble is it going to be? Are weapons allowed? How many people are going to be fighting at one time? All of those sorts of things. So usually the rumble would be between 20 and 50 gang members fighting an opposing force of 20 to 50 rival gang members. And would often be in a park or schoolyard. They didn't last very long, mostly just a few minutes at most. But it would result in broken bones and unconscious victims and sometimes even death. So that kind of sets the social background of New York at the time of West Side Story. So West Side Story was originally going to be called East Side Story, and it was first conceived as a theatrical show in 1949 by Robbins, Bernstein, and Lawrence. And it was going to be set in the east side of Manhattan. Uh, they originally planned the two rival gangs were going to be Catholic and Jewish. Uh, they tried to sell this idea to promoters and backers, and the money guys said, well, not so interesting. We're going to take a pass. So I had real difficulty getting the financial backing to do this theatrical production. But the news and history intervenes, and in 1955, this is clearly 6 years later, teenage Latin gang violence in Los Angeles made the news. And so Lawrence and Bernstein and Robbins changed the idea to involve a conflict involving Puerto Rican gangs and a white gang in the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And at once the project took off. Bernstein said, suddenly it all springs to life. I hear the rhythms, the pulses, and most of all, I can feel the form. So this story finally takes off. And this is the theater production comes first. Uh, Lots of rewrites, lots of changes. The movie comes out a few years later. Again, the cast of the characters, the leader of the Puerto Rican gang in the movie is actually Greek. Maria, the Juliet of our story, uh, from the Puerto Rican gang, is actually Ukrainian. Lots of infighting between the actors and actresses. They're young, different personality types. It becomes complete chaos. They have a budget. The budget severely winds out of control, way beyond the expectations financially of the backers. It's too late. You're deep into the project. They have to push it forward. The movie and the theater production are really breaking groundwork and incorporating social issues into the art form. This had not been done before. It was a very risky venture. Nevertheless, even the critics thought this was doomed to failure. However, to the public, it became a smash hit. It earned millions of dollars, became quite the financial success. The story, even though it's more than 60 years old now, is still relevant today. Now, within the movie, again, basically follows the Romeo and Juliet theme and the theater production. There's a lot of song and dance, which was totally new, uh, and especially in terms of gangs. But we see this again later with Michael Jackson and some of his music videos. Um, they actually did hire some local gang members to kind of keep people away from the sets and the filming. Bad idea. Violence erupts. Doesn't work well. Police get involved. It gets really messy. So some of the backdrop to the film and to the theater production. Everybody knows this. It has been used in everything from TV commercials to magazine commercials, still used today, still referred to today. So basically, this part of the lesson in reading is to just uh, give you a quick background of this phenomena, West Side Story. Okay, so one of the songs that are within the musical production of West Side Story is called America.